walk. And, I could tell you guys 1,000 funny Drake stories, but, one thing that I always try to say, and something I told him growing up.
Stephen David.
My name is Steve. This is, well, you guys know who he is. You guys have been in Greensboro. Actually, this is David. We were co-workers of Drake at TVI Market Pro 3. And we could tell you 1,000 great stories about Drake. He was a mentor for me after I got out of the retail.
Good afternoon. Most of you probably don't know me, but I've been a friend of Drake's for quite a while, 30 years. And we worked in a similar business, and we were on the road a lot, and we met up a lot as we traveled all over the country. And every time our schedules worked out, we did our best to get together. And when we were at home, we did our best to get together and share some things. When Betty Sue called me and told me about Drake's passing, she said, "Hey, we're going to have an accommodation for folks to speak and tell some funny little things about Drake and whatever you want to say." And I said, "Well, I'll think about it and I'll try to put something together, because I'll have to read it. I can't say it without breaking up." But in Drake, or in Doty tradition, she pretty well insisted that I take this opportunity, and y'all probably know how that goes. So I didn't think that any words that I could put together would really do a very good job of explaining who Drake Doty really was. So like Drake and I always did when we got together, we'd sit around and we'd conjure up some stories and some ideas and etc. So when I got to thinking about it, trying to get across the kind of life that I believed Drake lived and the kind of guy that he was, I put this little lighthearted story together, and it's called Drake's First Day in Heaven. So I'll read it. Hopefully I'll get through it. And hopefully nothing I say here, because we're talking about heaven, will offend anyone. But on February the 4th at approximately 1:30 a.m., Drake arrived at the pearly gates. As he stood in line waiting, Drake did what he always did. He observed the many other people of all kinds, checking everything. The man behind him happened to be an evangelist. No offense. And as they struck up a conversation, Drake described his life, how he had been in the Air Force as an airplane mechanic, how he loved his family and playing his guitar. Drake also told him he worked in the car business most of his life, even as a young kid. About that time, St. Peter showed up, good timing of course. He told Drake they were almost finished with his arrangements and that although they had been informed he was coming and they were expecting him, there was a slight delay. The evangelist leaned over and was intensely listening to every word between St. Peter and Drake. And as St. Peter described Drake's new digs, he said, your new home would be a shorefront estate on the Sea of Galilee, fully staffed with a housekeeper, your chauffeur, and a private chef. St. Peter explained that the fridge would be fully stocked with those heavenly Del Frisco prime steaks. And I say that because every time Drake and I met in Florida, that's exactly where I knew we were going to have dinner. And there's a big tray, y'all have never heard of this before, of ooey gooeys waiting in the kitchen. St. Peter chuckled and said, you'll never guess how we scooped that ooey gooey recipe. And you can have as many as you want. There's no weight gain in heaven and no high cholesterol. St. Peter continued explaining the delay. He said, Drake, heaven has processes too. Any of you car people out there? Well, you've never heard of this before. And this 127-point checklist helps us ensure you have an out-of-this-world experience. But unfortunately, when the angel porter pulled around your limo, I was doing my walk-around inspection and noticed the tires did not have Armor All applied and they weren't wiped down. And there were some water spots on those chrome wheels. We know how you are. That would have been the first thing you noticed. So we sent it back so it would be immaculate, just as your cars on earth were. We're finishing that up now. It's already been vacuumed and shined up, shouldn't be much longer. By the way, after you've had some time to relax and freshen up, we have planned a reunion with your mom and dad, Drake Jr., Doug, and your brother Randall. They will be picked up in your limo, brought over to share some daily bread and communion. It was about this point the evangelist just couldn't keep quiet any longer. He had heard all he could stand. With his face all red, like it was in the pulpit when he was preaching, he interrupted St. Peter and said, do you know who I am? I'm an evangelist that has dedicated my whole life to sending as many folks as possible to meet Jesus. And you mean to tell me I'm getting picked up by the city bus, dropped off at a small cabin on a hill, while this guy gets an oceanfront property with a staff, fully stocked fridge and a pantry, with all his favorite things and a limo. He's just a car guy. And you know what that means. St. Peter smiled and said, yes, but your kind's a dime a dozen up here. But we sure don't get many car guys, especially ones like Drake. I think we can all agree Drake earned his spot up there. He was more than a friend, he was a mentor and a confidant. He enjoyed serving others and took care of others without taking advantage of anyone. If someone was going through a rough patch, Drake would help them through it. With his witty humor and intelligence, Drake seemed to know exactly what to say, even though it took him a while to get to the point. Maybe that's why we remain close friends forever. To me, it was truly an honor and a privilege to know Drake. I will miss him, and I thank God for crossing our paths. Y'all all know he was a prankster, and I'm just going to share one little funny story. He and Betty Sue came up to mine and my wife's mountain house, and after dinner, I had made some apple pie moonshine. And my wife took out some glasses and put it on the counter and poured us a small drink because, you know, you can't drink much of that stuff. And I looked over at Drake and he was just staring and staring and staring. And I said, Drake, what are you looking at? He says, I'm trying to figure out if something is wrong with that glass or if I've had too much of this to drink. And I said, well, what are you talking about? He said, that glass is crooked. And we all broke out laughing. And it was a glass of a set that my wife had bought, and it was designed that way. But Drake just couldn't figure out if it was the glass or him. And he says, well, I just thought this stuff was that good, maybe it. And so he said, well, I gotta have this glass. And I said, well, what do you want that glass for? He says, I got some people I want to try this out on. Thank you.
I would come to the club, and I'll tell you all about Drake in a minute, but Drake would always have a beer. Don't leave, come back here.
I'm trying to get out.
And he would, somebody would serve him a beer, stand back, and all the time. Drake was, to me, one of the finest individuals I'll ever meet, without a doubt. A prankster. Well, we did have one problem. I was very jealous of Drake. He had hair, I didn't. But he would call me 2 or 3 times a week saying, how are things going, what's going on, how's this, how's that? And then we'd meet at the club. And it was just a very, 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 what do you call it, Randall? It was just, we all just melded together. And he said to me, he said, well, you know, we got a thing going on here. We've got to do something with out back, and we got to get some concrete poured. We got to get this poured. And he could do anything. He could put things together like people wouldn't understand. And I'm sorry that I didn't spend as much time with him that I could have. But I'll tell you one more story, and this is very typical of him. So I'm a contractor. I do road work. And I had a job that I was working on for about 3 weeks. And I was stymied as to how was I going to put this thing together. I called Drake. And I said, you know what?
When I approached Drake and asked him to consider serving as a trustee, he said what everybody would expect. He said, I'm honored to, I am with you. I still have a recent text from Drake from where we were working on approving a project, and he told me, I'm with you. That was Drake, always here and always with us. He was here every time the doors was open. When I think of Drake, many different words come to mind. Amazing, caring, comical, inspiring, extraordinary. Drake and I hit it off the very first day we met. In my life, I've been a part of many business ventures, and never had I crossed paths with someone that I felt we were so aligned on our views, not only in business, but in our personal matters. I can count on one hand the people I've respected and valued their opinion as much as I did Drake. I truly looked at Drake as a mentor and a leader. Drake had a way of telling me I needed to rethink something without making me feel like he was coming down on me. The first project we worked on together here was the awning out back. I remember him saying, "What are you waiting on?" And he says, "Jack and I are waiting on you." So from there, we got it rolling. I served as ER, which is, for y'all that don't know, that's similar to the president. That's the president position here. For 2 years, Drake never missed a meeting, and he supported us every step of the way. He moved his membership to the Statesville Lodge in June of 2021. He was a member of this organization since 1979. He had an unbelievable passion for this organization. For you that aren't aware, the Elks Lodge is a nonprofit organization that focuses on charitable works. Drake always wanted this lodge to grow so it could help others. The Thursday night prior to Drake's passing, he said to me, "I know you're a busy man, but can I have 5 minutes of your time?" Which we both knew would end up being 30 minutes to an hour. Drake had this 3-page document he had printed out and wanted to review with me. I brought it with me, and I'll lay it on the table, but you wouldn't believe how much time he put into it. Drake spent a lot of time highlighting in different colors and underlining the parts he felt was important. The time Drake spent on this document, in my opinion, was a testimony of his passion and dedication. Drake went over this paper line by line in detail with me about how successful Bucky's gas station was because of how they treat people like people. Drake told me, "Randall, we can really grow this Elks Lodge if we follow some of these key points." He said, "I feel in the world we have gotten away from simply caring about people and the simple things in life that we have to get back to." He said, we can have a major impact here in Statesville and help a lot of people that need a lot of help. I told him I could do anything he guided us to do, and he told me he could give guidance, but I had to do the project leading because he was too old to do that. So of course I agreed, and honestly I think Drake could talk me into anything. The highlighted paper was just one of many examples of Drake's vision and unbelievable passion for this lodge. So many things that have been accomplished during his time here would have never happened without his guidance and passion. I would like for you all to take the time after your meal and walk through the lodge and just look at the facility. Most everything you see, Drake had a hand in. The floors in this room, the chairs you're sitting in, all part of Drake's works and vision. I can remember last summer I was here in the parking lot. It was 90 degrees. I was spraying the weeds. Drake pulled up and he said, "You know you're not supposed to pick the hottest day of the year to spray weeds. And by the way, you missed a spot." Of course I laughed. Again, I knew he was right as always. Drake was always giving me guidance like I mentioned earlier. And when he drove off, I thought, is he always right? We were together most Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights. We would discuss things in our lives after our dinner, and he would always give me guidance to many of the projects I'm involved in and give me business ideas. A week or so before Drake passed away, we changed some tabletops together. He told me, "You know, I enjoyed this more than you'll ever know being your helper." I responded, "The pleasure was mine, Mayor." Here at the lodge, that was his nickname. We called him the Mayor. I would always tell Drake when he was leaving, "If you ever need me, I'm here for you." He would respond, "Same here," and I knew he meant it. The Saturday before he passed, he called me and he said, "Your helper is already laying out. I just got the job." I said, so Drake went on to say he could not meet me that morning to move the furniture because his vehicle would not make it through the snow. You heard that, Katie say? I told him Amber and I had gotten up early and we come up here and we had already moved the furniture. He said, why does that not surprise me? You two are 2 steps ahead of me. He said, it's a good thing you did because it was too cold for me to sleep outside. I said, it's too cold to sleep outside. He said, if I drive over there with this weather, Betty Sue is going to kick my ass. And we laughed and laughed. Drake told me a story when he was in the military. He was supposed to go on his routine flight, and his normal assigned seat was a friend of his, another soldier, went in his place that day due to some personal scheduling. Drake went to the site and he said, if I would have been in my normal seat, I would have lost my life that day. Drake told me God had a plan for me, and this is why I wasn't in that seat that day. I said, his plan must be to whip me and Bill Martin into shape, and he responded, I don't think God would give me that task knowing you two can't be fixed. And he looked at me with that smirk and said, do you? He just loved picking at us, and we loved it more than him. All joking aside, I feel the Elks Lodge was definitely part of God's plan Drake was speaking about, and we are very thankful of that. On behalf of the Statesville Elks Lodge, I would like to present this wooden flag we had made in loving memory of Drake. Hold that up.
Oh, you kid.
It's got a tag, loving memory with his name. It will forever hang in this lodge in his honor. On a final note, I asked Drake on his last birthday, when we were celebrating his 89th birthday, I said, Drake, what's the secret to living 89 happy and healthy years? Drake responded, live every day to the fullest, do what you love, and follow your dreams. But he also said, don't forget to help others. I encourage everyone to continue Drake's dream in his honor of continuing to grow this organization and helping those in need. Betty Sue, we love you, and your family, and your Elks family will always be here for you.
You have heard the tolling of the 11 strokes. This is to remind us that the elk of the hour of 11 has a tender significance. Wherever elks may roam, wherever their lot in life may be, when the hour falls upon the digital night, the great heart of elkdom swells and throbs. It is the golden hour of recollection, the homecoming of those who wander, the mystic roll call of those who have come and are no more. Living or dead, elks are never forgotten, never forsaken. Morning and noon may pass them by. The light of day sinks heartless in the west, but ere the shadows of midnight shall fall, the chimes of memory will be pealing forth the friendly message. You guys know the words. To our absent members.
To our absent members.
Thank you.
Okay, so here's our notes. There's no ship like friendship, so here's to you and me.
Take a shot.